Speaker, the choice is clear. With the national unemployment rate at over 8% for 41 consecutive months, we must stop the tax hike. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I yield myself 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized.
Look, I want to repeat, Joint Tax says 97% of small businesses would keep all of their tax cuts. And in Mr. Paulson's district, there are 1,345 people with income over $1 million, compared with over 325,000 households. That's the equation at stake here. That's the equation. I now have a real pleasure to yield 2 minutes to the very active gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you very much.
Rich Dale.
Massachusetts is recognized for 2 minutes.
Ask permission to address the House and revise and extend my remarks. There's one indisputable fact. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's one indisputable fact in this debate today, and that is that the Bush tax cuts used borrowed money. How much sense did that make, to borrow the money to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in America, the top 2%? The argument at the time was simply this, that we should give tax cuts to the people at the top because they create jobs for the people in the middle and at the bottom. Fact, the slowest economic growth at any time since Herbert Hoover was President of the United States. The argument or their assault on the Clinton presidency was that he raised taxes. The top bracket, 39.6%. 22 million jobs, the greatest economic growth spurt in the history of America. A reminder to our friends, an unemployment rate of 3.8%. So borrow the money during the Bush years for tax cuts so that we can give the wealthy, and my goodness, what a ride they've had for these 12 years. It is unbelievable when you look at what those rate cuts did to people at the top. We have a responsibility here to protect the middle class from a big tax hike next year. Last week, the Senate passed a bill that will extend tax cuts for 98% of the American people, the middle class. And now it's up to the House to provide some certainty to the middle class that their taxes are not going to go up next year. But instead of doing so, what are we doing today? Once again, we are having an argument about what to do for that top 2% of income earners in America, who our Republican friends can never seem to do quite enough for. Even more troubling, this tax package ends President Obama's tax cuts that make college more affordable and help working families with children. So not only are we attempting with their package today and proposal to hold the middle class hostage to extending tax cuts for the wealthiest, but they want to raise taxes on 25 million families
15 seconds.
with an average increase of $1,000.
15 seconds.
We need to extend the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and that's what we should be doing today for middle-income Americans and providing them with some sense of security and support. And my God, can we do any more to help the wealthy in America than what our Republican friends have done?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
At this time, I yield 1 minute to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Marchant.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Job Protection and Recession Prevention Act of 2012. Businesses in my district in Texas and across the country are reluctant to hire and make investments due to an uncertain economy and an impasse over taxes. This bill is a thoughtful step to bolster our economy and bridge the gap to tax simplification. This bill provides a serious game plan and a timetable that shows the American economy how to move forward. If we don't act, the looming tax hike could destroy an estimated 700,000 jobs, according to an Ernst & Young study. And it's no surprise, then, that the Institute of International Finance said that there is a strong case to extend lower Bush-era taxes due to expire at the end of the year in order to avert a fiscal cliff. I am proud to support and urge my colleagues to support this bill that helps U.S. job creators and gives businesses more of confidence to put Americans and Texans back to work. Yield my time.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
Could the Speaker indicate how much time there is on each side, please?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 11 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 13 3/4 minutes remaining.
Maybe I'll reserve if you're ready. Are you?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, reserves his time. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
So we have 11?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I yield 2 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in favor of the bill that we are facing here today. It's been an interesting debate that we've had now for some time. I learn a lot traveling around my district, but it was especially compelling when I was at a manufacturing plant, less than 40 employees, and they told me unprovoked that they said the estate tax going up to 55% would devastate their business. Those were their words. Devastate their business. It's not just farms and ranches, farmers and ranchers that would pay the estate tax. It would also be small businesses, and very thriving small businesses who put people to work, who provide benefits, health care, and otherwise. And truly, the 35% rate is a compromise. I would prefer to see no estate tax, given the fact that it is double taxation, and that certainly 55% is what many folks would consider confiscatory in nature. So I rise in favor of the bill that we are debating here today. I think that it is better policy, certainly better for our economy, that we would not raise taxes on the American people. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now yield 2 minutes to another distinguished member of our committee, Mr. Becerra from California.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, when the Wall Street banking crisis of 2008 hit, causing the worst recession since the Great Depression, it was the middle class that took it on the chin. More than 8 million Americans lost their job through no fault of their own. And as millions of Americans were losing their jobs and their homes, the big banks received bailouts, and CEOs continued to receive million-dollar payouts. While too many middle-class Americans are still out looking for work, this Congress is voting again to give over $160,000 a year in tax breaks to the richest 2% of Americans, while the average American will be lucky to get about 1/100th or maybe 1 or 2/100ths of that amount. Can anyone in this chamber blame the middle class for thinking the system is rigged against them? Mr. Speaker, we all admire financial success, but when we give away trillions in tax cuts that we cannot afford to those who need them the least, it's the middle class who has to make up the difference. To pay for these tax cuts, our Republican colleagues have voted to end Medicare and would force seniors to pay $6,400 more for their own care. On top of that, Republicans proposed changing Social Security, slashing its budget by over $800 million. It's an ideological agenda that chooses millionaires over the middle class. Regular folks pay more so that folks like Donald Trump and Mitt Romney can get yet another tax break. Einstein is credited with saying that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. 11 years after the Bush tax breaks became law and drove us deeper into deficits, let's not repeat these mistakes. Rather than having these debates about whether the richest 2% of Americans deserve extra breaks, we should stand with the middle class. Mr. Speaker, this should be an all-hands-on-deck moment. America works best when the middle class in America is working. Let's start talking about how we can get all Americans back to work and strengthen our economy. I urge my colleagues to reject this bill and support the Democratic alternative, which is focused on the middle class. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
Thank you. At this time, I yield myself 15 seconds. We have a note here from Stans 2 from Rowland Heights, California, a small business. And they were asked how would increased taxes impact your business, less hiring, more struggle to pay for expenses and payroll. If rates were allowed to increase, would that affect your ability to hire new employees? Absolutely. We've done nothing except cut staff for 4 years now. A tax increase could spell disaster. At this time, I yield 3 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Reichert.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, most Americans think that the economy is moving in the wrong direction, and most of them think it's Congress's fault. and that we've not done enough to help them take care of their families and give them financial security. They don't want political rhetoric today. They don't care who's wrong or who's right. They want to know what we're doing now, what we're doing today to make buying groceries and gas and paying the electric bill affordable. Mr. Speaker, if we don't act, a family of 4 that earns $50,000 a year will have an increase in their taxes of $2,200 every year. That's real money, Mr. Speaker. That's the difference between buying a box of Cheerios, that extra box, and paying the gas bill and saving for college. And for the job creators, the mood is even worse. We all know that small businesses create jobs. Every one of us in this House know small businesses create jobs. But the Democrats would raise taxes on them, killing 700,000 jobs. I refuse to raise taxes on small businesses while they struggle to bring our country out of this recession. I refuse to destroy over 700,000 jobs that support families who need and want breadwinners, not handouts. We must ask ourselves every day, what else can we do for these families? You know, we can offer them some long-term security so that when they die, their families, their farms, and their small businesses will survive and thrive. But tax increases don't even stop when you die. If we do nothing, the death tax increases to 55%. We pay tax when we earn the income, we pay when we invest our income, and we pay again when we leave it to our kids. You want to talk about a fair tax code, Mr. Speaker? So today, I'm voting for a clear path forward. After 41 months of unemployment above 8%, we must stop the tax hike. I'm committed to tax reform that will create jobs, grow our economy, and support families. I am voting today for working families, for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, and for family farms, Mr. Speaker. This bill puts America back on the right track. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
Could you tell us, please, again, how much time there is?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 9 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 9 3/4 minutes remaining.
Okay. I now yield 2 minutes to another active member of our committee, Mr. Doggett from Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for how much time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Gentleman is recognized.
Now is not the time to let the Republicans raise taxes on thousands of Texas families in order to provide more tax breaks for a privileged few. Republicans would hike the taxes by almost $500 for a married Marine corporal with 4 years of service and 2 children living in shirts. That's wrong. Nor is this the time for Republicans to tax opportunity. A single mom working as a nurse, helping a daughter attend the Alamo colleges or Texas State or ACC would be denied the $2,500 higher education tax credit that I authored. All of this in the very same bill that would give a Republican who earns $1 million a tax cut that is larger than that Marine or that nurse will earn in an entire year. If there were an Olympic medal out there for protecting those sitting atop the economic ladder by suppressing and at the expense of those trying to get a foothold on one of the first rungs, these Republicans would have no competition for going for the gold. Nor has this trickle-down Republican approach grown our jobs and our economy. Extending tax breaks for those at the very top, it was done in 2010 over my objection. It hasn't grown jobs in the past year any more than it helped to avoid the Bush-Cheney recession. And as for this much ballyhooed Ernst & Young report, it was bought and paid for by the same millionaires that are going to get the tax break bigger than what the nurse or the Marine earns all of next year, along with a few large corporations who paid for the report. It is not credible. It is not just to see some Americans have to lose tax breaks in order to help the few gain even more. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
At this time, I yield 3 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Black.
Gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, when nearly 23 million Americans are struggling to find full-time employment, President Obama and his Democrat allies seem to think that now is the time to raise taxes on small businesses. And the President may be satisfied with an 8% or more unemployment rate for 41 straight months, but I'm not, and more importantly, the American people are not. The American people don't need to settle for a country with fewer and fewer opportunities and a diminished future. And so the House today will vote to stop the tax hike for all taxpayers. And tomorrow we will vote to move forward with a comprehensive tax reform. And this is a critical step in providing the certainty that our small businesses desperately need to grow and create jobs. Now, the Democrats' proposal to raise taxes on nearly 1 million small businesses will cost more than 700,000 jobs, and they have not even offered a plan on tax reform. This is more of the same failed leadership that has given us the weakest economy recovery since the Great Depression. And Democrats think that we are just one more tax increase away from prosperity. But when has a nation ever taxed its way to prosperity? Prosperity is built by the American people, not the government. American entrepreneurs and small business owners are the lifeblood of our American dream, and they're the backbone of our economy. It is clear that we must stop this tax hike and reform our broken tax code to revive our struggling economy and keep the American dream alive. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
It's now my pleasure to yield two minutes to our ranking member on budget, Mr. Van Hollen from Maryland.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Mr. Levin. It's very important everyone understand the choice that's facing the House today. The Democrats will offer an amendment that will immediately extend tax relief to 100% of American people. The Senate has already passed that proposal, and if our Republican colleagues vote for it today, we can send it down to the White House. The President will sign it today. Someone asked what we're going to do today. We could provide immediate tax relief to 98% of the American people. Now, let's be clear. The Democratic proposal provides tax relief to everybody up to $250,000. What our Republican colleagues are saying is they will deny tax relief to 98% of the American people unless people making over $250,000 get a bonus, an extra tax cut. In other words, unless the top 2% get an extra tax cut, nobody else gets anything. It gets worse. We've heard a lot of talk here about small businesses, that we need to adopt the Republican plan in order to support small businesses. Just not true. The Democratic proposal, according to the nonpartisan independent Joint Tax Committee, provides tax relief to 97% of the businesses that we're talking about here. In fact, they point out that the other 3% of businesses include about 20,000 pass-through businesses that make over $50 million a year. Now, they may be good businesses, but these are not mom-and-pop businesses. The language we're hearing from our Republican colleagues would use small businesses as a cover to providing breaks for firms like Fortune 100 Pipeline Company, Enterprise Products Partners, PricewaterhouseCoopers, good business, not a mom-and-pop, KKR, investment banking, and guess what? Bain Capital. Bain Capital, the kind of small business that our Republican colleagues are trying to protect. This is all really in service to the trickle-down ideology. We tried it in the Bush administration, At the end of 8 years, we actually saw a net job loss. Can I have 15 seconds, Mr. Chairman?
15 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
I thank you, Mr. We tried trickle down. We lived it. We saw net job loss. But who picked up the tab? The rest of the country, because it drove a huge hole in our deficit. And in order to deal with that, if we don't ask folks at the top to pay a little bit more, the rest of the country ends up picking up the tab. That's just not right, and it doesn't help the economy. Thank you. Thank you.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
I'll yield myself 15 seconds.
Gentleman
I would
is
just say that my friend's proposals just aren't bold enough. The economy isn't growing. Unemployment is still above 8% for 40 consecutive months. We need to get on a plan for comprehensive reform, not just raising taxes on a segment, not just pitting one group of Americans against another, but let's get a comprehensive reform so we can get certainty, we can get job growth, we can get economic prosperity, and get Americans back to work. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished member from New York, a member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Reed.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of the proposed legislation to make sure that we do not increase taxes on any Americans come the end of this year. I think it's prudent, it's responsible, and it's the right message to send to America that we are going to stand with every American and every small business owner across the country and say, end of the year, no tax increases. And I appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and their passion and their commitment to raising taxes. They get to choose which threshold, $200,000, $250,000 or more. But it's clear to me that there's a clear distinction that the American people will have an opportunity to decide come this November between my Democratic colleagues across the aisle and this side of the aisle. My Democratic colleagues across the aisle, raise taxes as part of the solution going forward. This side of the aisle, I'm proud to stand, Mr. Speaker, to say no to raising taxes on any American moving forward. Now, the gentleman had recognized and said that some of these tax increases that we're talking about in regards to businesses are not the mom-and-pop shop. Well, I'll tell you something. I just had a conversation with Dick Clark from my district, a owner of Villager Construction. That's a mom-and-pop shop. Sterlater, a company out of Cuba, New York in my district, that's a mom-and-pop shop. Those are people that have told me that one of their greatest concerns as small business owners is the tax burden that they're going to face next year. Let's not stand for rhetoric. Let's do the responsible, prudent thing and say no to tax increases. And I leave it up to the American people, who I believe are hardworking taxpayers who are not stupid. They know what the distinction will be by the end of this year and next year when they come to the voting booth in November, that we stand for no tax increases, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are going down the path of let's raise taxes. Now is not the time to raise taxes in an economic climate when people are struggling, and we're trying to have the job creators have the capital so that they can put people back to work for today and tomorrow. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
Thank you. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Velasquez, who's ranking on small business and who has toiled in the vineyards and beyond on behalf of the small businesses of this country.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the bill before us today. Republicans love to focus on small businesses when it's convenient for them. They claim it is imperative to pass today's bill because if we don't, small firms will be harmed. However, today's bill is only good for millionaires and billionaires, not the nation's job creators. The argument that a partial extension of tax cuts hinders small businesses hiring relies on distorted facts. Republicans are using a warrant definition of a small firm that counts Mitt Romney as a small business owner. I don't think the average person considers 237 people whose income average more than $200 million a small business owner. Contrary to the Republican claims, this is not what American taxpayers think of when they hear small businesses. When most people think of entrepreneurs, they envision small manufacturers, architects, Main Street restaurants, and hardware stores. Those Americans who risk their savings to create jobs in our communities. Tax cuts should go to real small businesses that are creating jobs, not people who are simply moving money around for their own profit. Instead of addressing the top concerns small business owners, a lack of demand for their goods and services, this bill simply gives more tax cuts to the very rich. The numbers don't lie. Over 80% of the value of these cuts goes to millionaires. That is an average tax cut of $164,000. Let's call this bill what it really is, a tax cut for the rich, not for small businesses. That is not what our economy needs. Vote no. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
Mr. Speaker, how much time is remaining?
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 5 1/2 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 2 3/4 minutes remaining.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Dole.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly thank the chairman for his leadership on this. Mr. Speaker, I'm confused. I think my colleagues on the other side of the aisle haven't read what H.R. 8 is. They keep talking about how my colleagues and I are looking to try to raise taxes on a segment of the population. Actually, what this does is it extends current tax rates for everyone, for every single American. I can tell you that there are people all across the country right now that foreclosures are up. They're concerned about how they're sending their kids to school. We've got energy prices that are on the rise. We want to make sure that the government's not taking more from them. I have to tell you that I think that what we're talking about right now is trying to empower the American public. We want to make sure that we have upward mobility. We want to try to create growth in our economy. Mr. Speaker, in 2010, the President of the United States came before the American public and said, our economy is too fragile.
Will the gentleman yield?
We've got a very short period of time. Said our economy is fragile and we should extend these tax rates. That's when the economy was growing at 3.5%, Mr. Speaker. The Commerce Department just came out with statistics say we're growing at 1.5% today. There's no way in the world that we should be taking more out of the pockets of the American public. It's just not feasible. 2/3 of all net new jobs, Mr. Speaker, are created by small businesses. But this isn't just for small businesses. This is for every single American. We're running the experiment today, if you want to talk about higher taxes, more taking, in the state of Illinois. If you want to take a look at what's going on in the state of Illinois, we're dead last, and frankly, in too many categories. We're not creating jobs. Jobs are picking up and they're going to neighboring states. They're leaving because we've decided to take more from hardworking taxpayers in the state of Illinois. Well, frankly, what we want to do is make sure that we extend these for an additional year so that we can have real tax reform. That's what this is about. We want to talk about pro-growth tax policies so we can get the American public back to work. This is about jobs and the economy. Frankly, the good news is, and I tip my hat to my colleagues, because when I talk to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they also indicate to me that the #1 issue is jobs and the economy. So let's come together.
Another 15 seconds.
Let's come together. Let's not talk about how we want to raise taxes on the middle class, because frankly, that's just inaccurate, not true. We're looking to try to make sure these get extended for an additional year so that we can talk about pro-growth tax reform and get people off of the unemployment lines and back to work. So I do not want, and I applaud you for trying to get up there and try to plead your political point. But frankly, we need to come together. We need to make this happen for the American public.
Expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
How much time is left on this
Gentleman
bill?
from Michigan, Mr. Levin, has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has 3 1/4 minutes remaining.
We have one more speaker on this. Mr. Camp, do you have more than one?
I have one more speaker and then myself.
So why don't you call on the one, and then Mr. Hoyer is going to wrap up on this bill.
At this time, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lankford.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a tremendous amount of rhetoric and hyperbole in the conversation today. All this energy about how we're trying to raise taxes on different groups. Let's clear this up. This is about keeping the rates the same for another year for all Americans. But really, this debate is not about tax rates. The problem that my colleagues on the other aisle seem to identify is the problem in America is that some people in America have too much money. And the solution to fix this problem is that if people would go down the street, find someone with a bigger house, take some of their stuff and bring it to the other house, the problems in America would be solved. Things would be fair. But the issue is not whether we should tax one group more and then distribute that to another group. That doesn't create more jobs. That doesn't create more stability. That doesn't pull us out of recession. That only makes one group feel better that they took money from another group and gave it to another. There's really two philosophies that are at work here. Because we want to make this debate about taxes, it's really a philosophical issue. One group says that the purpose of taxation is to take from one group, redistribute it to another one to make America fair. The other group of Republicans say the purpose of taxation is to collect as little as possible to efficiently run a government so that individuals are able to keep their money. We became the most powerful, prosperous nation on earth because Americans were able to keep what they earned, invest it into other things, and to be able to grow it. Here's the real proposal. Number one, keep tax rates the same for another year. Number two, fix the broken code. 70,000 pages, 3.8 million words in this tax code. It needs to be fixed. It's miserably complicated. No American feels confident that when they file their taxes, they got it all right. We've got to fix this code and to be able to simplify it dramatically. It's going to take time to do that. So let's extend rates for another year. Let's spend next year fixing the code, and let's get this right for all Americans, not just some. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now yield the balance of our time on this bill to the distinguished whip, Mr. Hoyer from Maryland.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for the remaining 2 3/4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Designed to fail. That's what this bill is, designed to fail. And very frankly, you made sure that it was going to fail when you passed the amendment that added the reform bill and this bill together. Designed to fail. How sad. I don't think you want to raise taxes on anybody. I understand that. I'll accept that premise. But what we ought to do is to make sure that the agreement that we have with the Senate and the House, that at least the 98% of Americans who make less than $250,000 ought to have no increase in their taxes. At least we ought to do that. America knows we have agreement on that. And they're wondering why, when you have agreement, don't you take that agreement and give the assurance and certainty to 98% of the American working people that they won't have an increase in their taxes, so they'll have the confidence that they'll have that money in their pocket to perhaps purchase that refrigerator that they need, or that oven that they need, or perhaps a new car, or help their kid go to college. Why don't we give them that confidence, I say to my friends. Mr. Speaker, I wish we would do so. Today we could embrace the agreement that the Senate has come to and tell the 98% you're safe. And in addition to that, by rejecting this bill, we will reject taking money out of 25 million people's pockets that they rely on to support themselves and their children. That's what the Senate bill does. It protects the wealthiest in America while telling some of the poorest in America, least well off in America, you're going to pay more. You're going to get less. How perverse. How undermining of our economy. How undermining of the confidence of our people. Ladies and gentlemen of this House, we're better than this. Newt Gingrich talked some years ago in 1998 about the perfectionist caucus. And Mr. Speaker, he said, embrace agreement. He was agreeing with President Clinton and Newt Gingrich at that point in time on a budget, which adopted pay-go one more time, which is one of the reasons why we balanced the budget 4 years in a row. The Senate bill not only leaves 98% of the people, excuse me, the bill that we're now considering, the House Ways and Means bill, leaves 98% of our people at risk, while our bill gives 100% of the people a tax cut. let us reject the House bill, let us adopt the substitute, let us send it to the Senate and make it law. The President will sign it, and it can become law and give confidence and help to those 98% of Americans.
Time of the gentleman
yield
from
back the balance of my time.
Maryland has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
And I would just say this isn't just about taxes. And I would agree with my friend from Maryland. Republicans do not want to raise taxes on small businesses, job creators, investors, because it's also about the economy. This has been a dismal recovery, the worst since the Great Depression. Unemployment's been above 8% for 40 consecutive months. Their answer is to raise taxes on the small business sector, the area where we need to have those jobs to begin to be created. What we're saying is, let's keep the law the same for 1 year. We're the only nation in the world that has all of these tax provisions expiring year in and year out. Let's leave this the same for 1 year. Then let's move and adopt comprehensive tax reform and an expedited procedure to do that so we can finish that next year. If we go down their path of raising taxes on small businesses, 700,000 jobs will be lost. If we go down our path of extending current law for a year, bringing certainty, extending that law for a year, moving forward on comprehensive reform, addressing some spending problems we know this nation's had, 3 years of trillion-dollar deficits. If we do that, we create a million jobs. Vote for H.R. 8.
Time of the gentleman has expired. All time for debate on the bill has expired. For what purposes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, seek recognition?
I now call up the substitute.
Is the gentleman from Michigan offering an amendment to the bill?
I am.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in Part B of House Report number 112-641, offered by Mr. Levin of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 747, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, and a member opposed, each will control 10 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Could you be clear as to who has the right to close on this amendment?
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, has the right to close.
Okay, I now yield 2 minutes to another member of our committee, the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Lewis.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Mr. Levin for yielding. After 2 years of talking about spending cuts and deficit reduction, Republicans somehow believe it is wise to fill the pocket of each and every millionaire in America with an additional $160,000 tax cut. We've been here before. This is the same picture. Mr. Speaker, we all know what this is about. This is about two competing visions of America. The Democratic vision is opportunity for all Americans to prosper, while the Republican vision reserves prosperity for select few. That is not right, Mr. Speaker. That is not fair. That is not just. American hard-working families need tax relief, and they need it now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year, but now. If you believe in a strong, solid middle class, vote no on this bill. If you believe in American opportunity, vote no on this bill. If you're serious about reducing the deficit, vote no on this bill. I urge all of my colleagues to vote no on this bill and to vote yes on the 11th Amendment. It is simple, the right thing to do. We can do better, much better, by voting for the 11th Amendment. It is the right thing to do. It is a fair thing to do. It is a just thing to do. We should do it and do it now. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Claim time in opposition to the amendment.
Yes, I do.
Gentleman's recognized for such time as he may consume.
Let me just say that this substitute increases taxes. It increases taxes on small businesses, the very sector that we need to be growing to bring us out of this recession. It does not include tax reform. There's no path to tax reform. Our codes had 5,000 changes in the last decade. The complexity is making it difficult for Americans to know what their responsibilities are. They suspect others get a better deal under the code because of the complexity. If we can take that away and move to a system that has a lower rate, revenue neutral, that closes off some of these 5,000 changes that have been made in the last few years, we can create 1 million jobs in the first year alone. One of the things that led us into this recession is the housing crisis. And here we have a letter from the National Association of Home Builders saying that housing can be a key engine of job growth that this country needs. However, the recovery we are seeing remains fragile. As the rest of the economy is experiencing softening conditions, now would be the worst time to raise taxes. The National Association of Home Builders believes that lower rates, simplification, and a fair system will spur economic growth and increase competitiveness. That's good for housing because housing not only equals jobs, but jobs mean more demand for housing. This is just one area that if we raise taxes, as this substitute attempts to do, we're going to really close off what little recovery we've been seeing. And obviously it's been very anemic. Quarter job growth or economic growth is just over 1%. We need to be the best country in the world. We need to have the strongest country in the world. We need to have the best tax code in the world. Raising taxes on one segment, one group of Americans against another, is not a way to get America's greatness back. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the substitute, Democratic substitute on this tax provision. I would like to note that not a single one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I have tremendous respect for Chairman Camp and the members of the Ways and Means Committee, not a single one refuted what I spoke about before, about the fact that if the Republican tax bill were to pass, as opposed to the Democratic tax bill, there would be an increase in taxes on 225,000 military men and women, many of whom are in active duty overseas as we speak. I mentioned in my remarks that under the Democratic bill, the EITC rate, the Earned Income Tax Credit, under the bill would afford a sergeant in our Army today with 8 years service, married with 3 children, and has basic pay of $34,723, would receive under the Democratic plan an EITC benefit of $3,508. Can I have an additional minute, Mr. Chairman?
You an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Under the Republican bill, be very clear about this, Mr. Speaker, the earned income tax credit under the Republican bill would only be $2,390. Now, I do the math. That means under the Republican bill, that sergeant and his or her family would have a $1,118 tax increase. You can't get around it. That's the facts. That's the numbers. They speak loud and clear. And not a single one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle refuted that. We have refuted the $250,000 issue as it pertains to small businessmen and owners. The reality is the men and women on the front line defending this democracy, defending our freedom, defending our way of life, allowing for small businessmen and women to prosper in this country, they're not worth a tax break. Your bill increases taxes on our military men and women. There's no getting around it. A vote for the Republican bill is a vote to increase taxes on military men and women. A vote for the Democratic substitute is a tax cut for our military men and women.
Time of the gentleman from New York has expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
I'll yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
You know, I don't have to refute what the member from New York says, because the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation has already done that. They've said the matters the gentleman's talking about are not tax increases. Those are spending through the tax code. That spending was put into the tax, I will not yield, through the stimulus bill. We know how unsuccessful that was in lowering our unemployment rate below 8% as was promised. So at this time I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman, and I rise in opposition to the substitute amendment that we're debating here, Mr. Speaker. The reason why is it's clear. The Democratic substitute amendment that we're discussing is a further expansion of tax increases that the Senate passed recently. I'm opposed to those tax increases. We're dealing with a situation with the proposed amendment will raise the estate tax and take 55% of our hardworking Americans' assets when they pass away. They are raising taxes on dividends and capital gains at a time when senior citizens rely on those most in these dire economic times. They also seek to raise taxes on those making $200,000 to $250,000 and above. Raising taxes on those individuals goes right to the heart of our small businesses across America, coast to coast, north to south. In this dire economic time, I actually agree with President Obama when he signed the tax rates in December 2010, when he says in those dire economic times we don't raise taxes on Americans. I just ask my colleagues to join me and say, reject this substitute, freeze the tax code, and deal with the issue of comprehensive tax reform over the next 12 months and put no Americans in harm in having their tax bill increase at the end of this year. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
It's now my real pleasure to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, who is the chair of our caucus and an active member of our committee. 2 minutes to Mr. Lewis.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank our distinguished leader as well. This debate today is extraordinarily informative. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. This is about saving and preserving our middle class. Lauren Michigan from Connecticut said to me recently, a mother who came out to talk about student loans says, when only the rich can follow their dreams, we have a problem. And so here today we face a very clear choice that I think all Americans understand. We should be able to come together as Democrats and Republicans and provide a tax break for everyone up to $250,000. Lauren was right. We have a problem. A constituent of mine said, why is it that Congress doesn't understand what they're doing? It's throwing all of us into the deep abyss of uncertainty. It's that deep abyss of uncertainty that all Americans are concerned about, and what they want is us to come together, and we know that we have a bill that has passed the Senate, a bill that the President will sign, a bill that we virtually agree on both sides of the aisle. So what really frustrates the American citizens and the people in my district is that we can't come together. I implore my colleagues on the other side, don't plunge us further into this dark abyss. Do the things that the wealthy amongst us have more than the ability to shoulder, and make sure that we all come together as Americans and do the right thing on behalf of our constituents. That's what the Laura Michigans want. That's the kind of the dream that we need to provide for all American citizens, and that's what this country desperately needs, is a Congress that will take leadership. There are times when you need to step aside, and there are times when you need to step up. We need to step up as a Congress and pass this Democratic alternative.
Connecticut has expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
I yield 1 minute to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Black.
Gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've been back in the district talking to my constituents and visiting many of the businesses and the job creators in the district, I have continued to hear from them that if we have one more tax increase on them. They're just not sure that they can survive. Now, these are good people that I go to the grocery store with, I go to church with. I know how hard they're working. I know how hard their families are working in order to keep businesses going within our community. And when we know that 2 out of every 3 jobs are created by a small business man or woman, we cannot at this time when our economy is so fragile impact those very folks who are creating the jobs for so many people in the district. And I hear this over and over again, and they look at me and say, Diane, please go back to Congress, and please relay this to the members of Congress, that we need to make sure that we have certainty and that we don't. Now I have another 30 seconds.
Yes, I'll yield an additional 30 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized for 30 seconds.
That we don't impact them in their businesses so that they have to close down and once again increase the amount of unemployment. So my colleagues on the other side of the aisle do not have a plan. Their plan is to increase the taxes on this group of people. Second to that are those who continue to say to me, especially those who are looking at planning for their families, for the future of what they're going to leave for them. They're not going to have that, they're not going to be able to leave those things that they've worked so hard because the estate taxes are going to go up. We cannot do this to the people in my district. I'm going to be here to fight for that and to make sure that when we have this vote today.
Time of the gentlelady from Tennessee has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from
I yield
Michigan,
back my time.
Mr. Levin.
Might I ask my colleague from Michigan, how many speakers do you have left?
I'm prepared to close.
Say it again.
I'm prepared to close.
It's now my privilege to yield 1 minute to our distinguished leader, the gentlelady from California.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I thank him for his legislation on the floor today to strengthen the backbone of our democracy, the great American middle class. Today we can do just that by passing President Obama's middle-income tax cut, which is on the floor today as a Levin substitute. And it's already passed the Senate and could be signed into law by the President before the weekend. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to give a tax cut to 100% of the American people. We have an opportunity to relieve some of the uncertainty that exists in our economy as to how we are going to pay the bills and how America's working families are going to pay the bills. We have an opportunity for fairness, which is an all-American value, for fairness, for our families, for our businesses, for our budget. We must not, as some people always accuse Congress of doing, miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. We have to take advantage of the opportunity that is here today. The bill provides for fairness for the middle class and certainty, as I mentioned. The Republican alternative, which says not only do we want to give 100% of the American people a tax cut, we want to give a bigger and better tax cut to people making over $250,000 a year. 2% of the American people. In order to do that, we greatly increase the deficit, which would incur borrowing from other countries, including China, and to top it all off, in order to give a tax cut to the wealthiest people in our country, we have to increase taxes for the middle class in order to pay for that. If you make over $250,000 a year, you can over $1 million a year. If you make over $1 million a year, the Republican tax proposal will give you a tax cut of $160,000 on average. And on average, America's middle-income families would have to pay $1,000 more in taxes. You know, we work for the American people. You are our bosses. So as our bosses, what would you instruct us to do when it comes to reducing the deficit, giving a tax cut to 100% of the American people, which will inject demand into the economy and therefore create jobs. So we're reducing the deficit, we're creating jobs, we're having fairness as a principle of how we go forward. Make no mistake, by refusing to vote for the Senate-passed bills, House Republicans are giving more tax breaks to the richest 2%, tax breaks they don't need and we can't afford. At the same time, as they cut taxes for the rich, as I said, they would raise an average of $1,000 on 25 million American families, families who rely on the money for day-to-day needs to pay the bills. That isn't fair, and Democrats will fight to prevent these tax increases on middle-income families in order to give a tax break to the wealthiest people in our country. Today is a day that we can end some uncertainty. People talk about the cliff, how we're going to go over the cliff come January. Let's not even go anywhere near the edge of that cliff. Let's pass this bill today. It will save about, well, just under $1 trillion, because we're not giving those tax cuts to the high end. That's almost all the money that is needed to avoid the sequestration come January. So again, we are addressing the uncertainty not only in the lives of the American people, but in the life of our economy. Or today is the day that Republicans will continue to hold the middle class hostage to tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country. I urge my colleagues to join Mr. Levin, join the President of the United States, join all of us. There isn't a person in this room, in this body, I think, who doesn't support tax cuts for the middle class. Why can't we just do that? Do what we can agree upon right now, tax cut by the weekend, alleviating uncertainty for our economy as we go forward, and then we can have a debate about what a tax code should look like that has fairness, simplification, and again, keeps us competitive, innovative, and number one, allowing the private sector to create jobs. Again, jobs, jobs, jobs. We're going to reduce that deficit by having additional revenue, by creating growth, by addressing spending so that we're investing in those initiatives that grow our economy. Pretty soon, when we end this debate, it'll be around the time Americans' families will sit down to dinner at the kitchen table or wherever, and they will have these discussions about how they pay the bills to stay in their home or their apartment, wherever, bills on how they're going to pay for their children's education, how their pensions are affected by all of this. The list goes on and on. With one vote, we can alleviate that uncertainty. We're not going to eliminate it, but we can lessen it. We have that responsibility. Let's not miss the opportunity and miss an opportunity to do just that. So I thank you, Mr. Levin, for your leadership, and the members of the committee for all of yours, and yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I reserve. Are you ready to close?
I'm prepared to close. I'll reserve.
I yield myself the balance of it.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
There are a few unrefuted facts. Small business, 97% of small businesses will receive all of their tax cut. Don't listen to the propaganda to the contrary. Everyone will receive their tax cuts up to $250,000 of income. Don't listen to propaganda that says otherwise. And income over $1 million, for those who have that, would receive under the Republican bill 70 times more than the typical family, and when the two bills are combined, 150 times more than the typical family. 150. Let me say just a word about tax reform, which I favor. It's being used as an argument for inaction. But look, let's be realistic. No matter who controls the Congress next year, there won't be tax reform until maybe the spring or the summer. So are you going to use that same argument for tax reform, say in a lame duck, against middle-income tax cuts? Or in January, you're going to use the same argument? You're going to use tax reform as a shield to protect the high-income taxpayer? In a word, the Republican bill is a path to nowhere for middle-income taxpayers. Our substitute is a sure path. Pass it. The Senate already has. The President will sign it. Act now. Vote for the substitute. I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 3/4 minutes.